Hi, this is Maddie from Quiltsmart, and today we're going to show you a video about our Dahlia pattern. You can see that the one on the left is our typical Dahlia pattern, and that's about 47 inches wide, and the little one next to it we're calling Little Dahlia, and is a nice variation. This is what the pack looks like. On the back there's 3 different layouts that you can use. This is with the bigger variation, and what I have here by the sewing machine is a smaller one. You can just make as many petals as you want. What you're going to get in the interfacing pack is sections for the petals. This one is marked A. So you're just going to sew along the solid lines and continuously from one shape to the next. Now just trim on the dash lines around each of the little shapes. Sew all your other sections on one side except Z. For the Z shape, you're going to pivot at the corners, and as you see here, there's 2 sides to sew, 2 solid lines, but it's as if it's one. You just pivot just like that and continue to the other edge. And after you stitch on the 2 sides, you will be trimming around the edges of the shape. And now you can see how the pieces look kind of all lined up together, A, B, C, D. And remember, I'm just doing a little dahlia in this video. You could keep going with the other size shapes. Take your shapes, open them up, give a nice little finger press, and flip that after the finger press. We're going to flip the interfacing to the back. And now the fusible will be on the back. A finger presser works nicely too, to make that seam very nice either end. This is piece C, so you can see how they increase in size. Here's my pieces turned. A. See this little line? That's what we're going to be using as a placement line. B, C, and D. I'm going to take piece B and overlap on A to that placement line on A. Using an applique pressing sheet, I'm going to give that a little press. You're going to need to peel the applique pressing sheet a little bit because it is a fusible, and keep overlapping your shapes along the placement line and fusing them together. Now D is going on C. And fuse. If you were making a bigger one, you'd keep going. Here's what the shapes look like turned around, and I just give them another press on top of the applique pressing sheet. And there would be just some more shapes here if you were doing the bigger dahlia. I've peeled it off the applique pressing sheet and it's held together nicely and ready for sewing. Now I have a nice little zigzag stitch, and I just go along the edge of each of the sections. You can see how nice that looks. For the little dahlia, you're going to take the facings and cut them in half. The big dahlia will use the whole facing. So just cut that in half like that. And fusible side, the rough side of the interfacing to the right side of the fabric. There's a little dashed line that is going to go right along the raw edge of your wedge for your flower. Don't worry if that goes off a little bit at the edge. And then you're going to stitch on the solid line, removing pins as you go. You'll get perfect sizing because of the printed interfacing. Then you're going to trim along the dashed line so that the interfacing is nice and even with the petals. And then turn it as you did before, finger pressing the seam nicely. And then turning the interfacing to the back side. This will put the fusible on the back side. Tuck under the edge at the point. Now your blades are done, and you're just going to position them as you did before along the line that you see that was on the interfacing facing. And we're going to stitch with the zigzag, same stitch length, right along the edges, and you can use a stiletto if you need to make that point match up perfectly, and just keep peeking and sewing. I like to do the dahlia in a few small sections and then put them on a table, a flat table, so that I can tell that it's going to lay nice and flat. And I pin that together, and then I'll do the final seams after I make sure it's nice and flat. Now we stitch the final zigzag, starting from the outside and going all the way to the edge of the blade. One thing you can do if you're having trouble with your inside is sew a little gathering stitch around the inner petals. Next, we're going to put the circles on. You can have up to 3 that are in the pattern. You stitch those the same way you did your little petals, where you stitch on the solid line and trim on the dashed line, and you cut a little opening and turn them. Use a finger presser, pointer creaser to get the edges out really nice and smooth. You can see the 3 sizes here. After centering and fusing your large circle with an applique pressing sheet to the flower, you're going to zigzag and then fuse the other 2 smaller circles and zigzag those. Now stitch around the circles with the zigzag stitch. Use the stiletto if you need to help ease it. And go all the way around, overlapping your beginning stitches on both circles. Now we're going to add the Z shapes. Now for the bigger dahlia, you put them at the end of each blade. You're going to use an applique pressing sheet. For the little dahlia, you just eyeball them in between the shapes, each time about 1/4 inch below the point. Now we're going to stitch at the bottom of each of the Z petals with the same zigzag stitch, starting at the end, the outer edge of the Z, and going down toward where you pivot and go back out. You're going to clip the threads. You can clip them as you go along. And I like to back stitch here a little bit. Then what I do what I call a jump stitch, where I go over to the next petal and start toward the end, and again go down to the pivot point. Right there, pivot and go to the edge. I'm just zigzagging. And then I jump over to the next one. Zigzag backstitch down to the pivot point. Pivot and go to the edge, and then I'll backstitch. And I keep going around the whole dahlia till that's done. Look how pretty this looks. We're gonna put this on this background, so we have a rather simple dahlia on a busy background, and we're going to fuse that. You can mark your background by putting some crease in the quarters, and then just with your steam iron go around the edges of the dahlia so it gets fused nicely to the background. And now stitching around the outer edge of the entire dahlia, pivoting at each of the outside points. So I hope you try making the Quiltsmart Dahlia. Both sizes are fun to make. If you liked our Dahlia pattern, you're sure to like our Drunkard's Path and Broadway border. They are both featured in this adorable little quilt.